Hello and welcome to another episode of Tech Time Today. I am your host, Jeff Whelpley, and this episode will be a little bit different than our previous couple episodes. I had gotten into the habit of doing some heavy editing, recording like an hour of content with a guest, and then editing it down to about 20-ish, 15-ish minutes. I'm going to go back to that format periodically. Actually, I have one even scheduled with one of my friends, Alejandro, for next week talking about SEO. But I wanted to get rolling a few of these live sessions. It's slightly different format, be it slightly more riffing, unedited, but I will try to keep them short, stick to a topic. Today, I'm going to be talking about a high level of my dev workflow using AI. And I think this is a topic I go to a CTO forum once a month in Boston with a bunch of other leaders from various Boston startups and companies. And it's a frequent topic of discussion, like what are the best practices that everybody's using? And actually, it's probably a different topic of discussion talking about best ways of using AI in a team. And actually, I'll have a separate episode on that because I have a lot of good content for that as well. This one is going to be higher level, just some like the key things. In fact, just two main things. Okay, three. I forgot about one. Three main things that I think are key to having a productive AI workflow. And I will also later this week, I'm working on some content where I'll actually be doing screen share with some of the code I've been working on for a sort of play project. And I'll get into the actual application of some of the stuff I'm going to talk about. But okay, let's get into it. So I mentioned, okay, three things. And the first one is that I every day actually use both Gemini and Claude. I sometimes use periodically other tools just because of a variety of different reasons. So I have used Copilot in the past, used Cursor at various times, which obviously uses different models underneath the scenes. And obviously, I've used OpenAI for a bunch of different stuff. So I feel like I've used a lot of the main tools, but in my main developer workflow, I try to focus on two and not just one, because I do feel that there's enough differences between the model that there's actually a lot of benefit to using two, not more than two, because I mean, it gets to be crazy if you're trying to put the same thing in three or more different generative AI, different LLM interfaces. So I do focus on two and only two most of the time. And the two that I like for coding specifically is Gemini and Claude. I do feel like I've gotten the best results from them. Not saying the other ones are bad; they all are pretty good in terms of coding. But I think Gemini and Claude are again for me. But my main thing there, I guess, would be first of all to get into your workflow using multiple ones, using two, where you see the results comparatively to one another. I found a lot of value from that. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is something that I think a lot of people are talking about, but I want to sort of emphasize this in a slightly different way: the importance of creating a plan, a detailed plan from a interactive back and forth with the LLM before you actually do any coding. I feel like I was thinking about different ways to like illustrate this and kind of emphasize my main point with this. And one of the things that I've run into a lot talking to other developers, tech leaders, and not tech people too, is about, oh, yeah, AI seems like it's kind of cool, but it's not perfect. And they bring up like scenario X, Y, and Z where it didn't do the right thing. Okay, that may be true, but I would say 9 times out of 10, when I dig a little bit deeper in those scenarios, the person did not actually try to come up with a detailed plan ahead of time. I think that it is a critical step to getting the most value. Sure, there are times where you can one shot things and it works. And over time, LMs will get better at doing that, no doubt. You have to give less context. There'll be different tricks they're doing, but to maximize your efficiency, by far the biggest thing you could do is focus on not changing any code, writing any code at first. Just have a back and forth and create a detailed plan. I actually have it even for small changes, whatever. Generate a design markdown file. And in fact, okay, going back to the number one of using the two different LLMs, what I'll do is I will have the initial context that I sort of put into both Gemini and Claude, help me come up with a plan for doing this, step-by-step plan, obviously, and then and let's memorialize it in, and I name them two different documents. I go back and forth with each of them, and a lot of times in the back and forth, I'll realize certain points in one or the other and kind of bring them together. Where ultimately the design docs are close to, like, they address all the right points, but a lot of times they have some slight differences. Once I feel like it's covered what I want it to do, then I'll have one of them look at both of the design docs and be like, okay, what are the differences here? What let's compare, contrast, and then like finally merge into one thing. Okay. So once you get into that, that is a key step. So it should take you a long time to do this, like relatively speaking. I mean, not like days or whatever, but the expectations should be, especially for non-trivial changes, that yeah, you may take an hour, even like for complex changes. I've definitely spent an hour just literally working on the design implementation doc. And that is very time well served. The more detailed, the more that you can get examples, the more you can break them out into chunks. That's actually an important part too of like implementation steps that are doable and verifiable. That will lead to ultimate success as well. So, okay. Number two, the end result, like number one's use the two different LMs. Number two is really focus on creating a detailed design document, series of documents that ultimately merge into one of what you want to implement, where you understand. Like, and that's the other thing. Okay, actually, before I move on to the last thing, this is actually an important point, because sometimes I'm implementing something where I don't actually, it's technology I don't know a lot about, or an API I haven't used, or something like that. I really do not believe in using the LLMs as a complete black box. Like, I think that's where you start to go down the path of leading to issues. What you can do though is you basically use it as a learning tool. So like in the process of creating your design doc, you're bringing up, oh geez, you're bringing up different issues. Hold on a second. Sorry, I accidentally pressed the wrong button here. Okay, sorry, I'm back. You bring up different things that you're not aware of, and it's a learning process. So like in your design doc, you should at the end of the day understand each of those steps. Like, so if it was an API you didn't use before, it's like, okay, like show me exactly how that works, like let me understand that, like teach me some of it. So it's not just a matter of creating the design doc, it's also a matter of teaching you so that you understand. Actually, that's like such, I feel like, an important part. Like if you get to the implementation step where you don't understand what's going to be implemented, how do you know that it did it right? Like I that part seems crazy to me. And ultimately I think that leads to less successful outcomes. Okay, so now for number three, during the implementation, and I guess this point is actually part of creating a design doc, but I just like want to separate it out into its own thing because it's so important. So when you're implementing it, you shouldn't a lot of times say, okay, just implement everything in this, unless it's a small, simple change. If it's a more complex one, more than likely in your design doc, you've split it up into steps or whatever. So you do want it to be like, okay, implement step one, and then let's verify, make sure it's working correctly. The most powerful thing you can do is ensure. Well, first of all, I'm a huge believer of at this step using one of the CLI based interfaces. So either Gemini CLI or Claude Code. There's the new ones for the codecs. There's other ones for the other companies too. But using one of the CLI tools, because that allows you to have a better ability to give the LLM, tell them how to test and verify the changes that it's making. So you want it to make the change in your local code according to the step, but also include in that, how do you know for sure that what you changed worked? And that is, like, I cannot overstate how powerful that is when you take the time to do that, because like time and time again I see this happening, that went through this whole process, have the steps to implement, and quickly have this, okay, for this first step, in order to verify that it works, first run it locally, like check this URL that when you restart the dev server, because again, the CLI has access to all this stuff. So restart the dev server, check this page, make sure that it has this, like actually run these test scripts, make sure that they pass. Maybe even for some of the changes, I'll even tell it, okay, deploy to staging, test it in staging by doing X, Y, and Z. Like having that detailed testing plan, like that is where it really, really creates like the power, because what will happen inevitably, no matter how hard you try to plan and be really detailed about it ahead of time, is that you'll implement your code, deploy it or run it locally, run the tests, see something's wrong. And when you've given it that feedback loop, then it can try and try and try and try again until it works. So, like, if you can do all those things, like you will definitely become 10 times more productive much, much quicker. And there's a lot of other small details that I'm like kind of glossing over, like the specifics of what you include in context files, and I definitely didn't mention a whole bunch of things, but I feel like those three things are the most important ones that I've found to being successful. That's it for today. I have a bunch of things planned for this week. Like I said, I'm next, probably tomorrow, actually, I will go over. I was at Brighton SEO last week, an SEO conference, where I think the biggest one in, well, I don't want to overstate, like it's a big one, and learned a lot. I have a lot that I've thought about the state of SEO. So either tomorrow or the next day, I'll go over that. I have an interesting implementation that I'm doing with Cloudflare and their real-time interface. They have like a new real-time interface for WebRTC audio and video that I think will be interesting. So I have a bunch of stuff planned for this week that I'll try to do some more of these. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again next time on Tech